Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi wa kafa wa salatu wa salamu ala man la nabiyya ba'da amma ba'd. As the Shaykh al-Hadith Moulana Zakir Rahmatullah alayhi, the Fazail al-Sadaqat part 2. The reason why we're reading Fazail al-Sadaqat part 2 is because the Shaykh Rahmatullah alayhi used to often advise the Murideen and the Salikin to read certain kitabs as part of their spiritual tarbiyat. One of the books that he used to emphasize was Fazail al-Sadaqat, which has two parts, part 1 and 2, but he used to emphasize part 2 specifically. And the reason why he used to emphasize Fazail al-Sadaqat was virtues of charity, because in effect, or in reality, Fazail al-Sadaqat is actually Kitab al-Zuhd, the book of asceticism. It's a book that if a person reads very carefully, diligently, regularly, on a regular basis, it detaches the person away from dunya and gives him raghbat for the akhirat. And Kitab al-Zuhd, the book of asceticism, is a genre of literature that is often emphasized within the khanqahs, within the zawiyas, by the mashayikh, to disincline people away from dunya and to show them that the real purpose of your life is akhirat. Hadith number 81, Hazrat Shaykh Rahmatullah alayhi mentions a hadith narrated by Shaddad ibn Aws radiallahu ta'ala anhu. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Al-Kayyus man dana nafsa wa amila lima ba'da al-maut, that the wise person is the one who recognizes nafs and he acts for that which comes after death. He understands what his situation is, and the real life, the everlasting life, is the one in the hereafter. Wal-ajizu, the incapable one, is the one man ittaba'a nafsa whoever hawaha, who allows his nafs to follow his desires. وَتَمَنَّى عَلَى اللَّهِ, and he has tamanna, he has hope upon Allah Almighty. He lets his nafs do what he wants, lets him follow his whims and desires. Then he turns around and says, Allah Ta'ala bu ghafur che. Allah Ta'ala is greatly forgiving. Allah is Rahman ar-Rahim. But at the end of the day, you got to put your pound where your mouth is. First of all, you got to walk the walk and then talk the talk. Talk the talk and walk the walk both together. In that, he shouldn't let his nafs do what he wants, but at the same time, control his nafs and then have hope in Allah Almighty. There's a lengthy discussion about this, as the Shaykh mentions lots of things. And then he mentions within the commentary, continuing on from what he mentioned last week on page 211, he says, इस किस्म के अवहाम आखिरत के बारे में काफिरों को पेश आते हैं. Talking about the mazmoon before it, that some people, some Muslims, they sometimes say things about the akhirat, and he says that these type of whisperings, these type of suggestions that come in their mind, they also present themselves to the kafirs, the disbelievers. मुसलमान अपनी ज़ुबान से मुसलमान होने का इकरार करने की वजह से ज़ुबान से तो ऐसी बातें नहीं कहते. When it comes to Muslims, they testify from their tongues that they're Muslims. They don't say such things like this. लेकिन वक्त आलशानों के अहकाम को पस से पुश डालकर उसके गुनाहों का इर्तिकाब करके शहवतों दुनिया की लज़्ज़त में मुनहमिक होकर अमली तौर पर ज़ुबान हाल से गोया वो भी यही कहते हैं. Then he says, however, they throw the ahkam of Allah Almighty behind their back. They carry out sins. Shahwaton dunya ki lazzaton mein munhamik hokar, they become engrossed inside their desires, inside the pleasures of the dunya. Amali taur par, by carrying out actions in the physical actions, which isn't the actions of the akhir, but actions of dunya. Zuban hal se, from the tongue of their actions. Our mashayikh often mention inside the kitab, inside the durus, they mention that there's zuban qal and zuban hal. Zuban qal is the speech of the tongue, that you say something, in the spoken word. You testify, you say something through the spoken word. But sometimes your actions are such that you're speaking in zuban hal, from the tongue of the condition. For example, you might be asked to do something and you don't want to do something. So you might say something with your tongue, nah, nahi, no, I'm not going to do this. This is zuban qal, which is the speech of the tongue. But at the same time, you might not say that, or you might just shrug your shoulders, or you might frown, you might turn your head away. This is zuban hal. So he says that through the actions and the tongue of the condition of their limbs, they're showing. The Muslims are also saying this, with that we don't really believe in akhirat. Why? Because we're not caring about the akhirat, but we're caring about dunya. वरना कोई वजह नहीं कि वो दुनिया को आखिरत पर तरजीह दे. Otherwise, he mentions that there's no reason for anyone to give tarjih and to give preference to the dunya over the akhirat. ये लोग जुबानी तौर पर दूसरे धोखे में पड़े हुए हैं. He says that these people when they speak, they're actually in deceit. कहते हैं कि अल्लाह ताला शानो करीम है, गफूर है. They say they carry out actions and they say at the same time Allah Ta'ala is Kareem. He is all benevolent, He is very kind. Ghafoor hai, He is forgiving. Rahim hai, He is merciful. Uski maafi ke hum umidwar hai. We have hope and desire that Allah Almighty will forgive us. Humko uski maghfir pe i'timad hai. We rely and we have trust in His forgiveness. Uska umidwar rehna matloob hai. And it's और उसका उम्मीदवार रहना मतलब है, and is sought after, that you have hope in Allah Almighty. Mahmood is praiseworthy, pasandida, praiseworthy. Uski rahmat bari wasi hai. They say things like that. Allah Ta'ala is greatly merciful. Uski maghfirat ke daryaon ke muqable hamare gunah kya cheez hai. When it comes to the ocean, the seas and the rivers of His forgiveness, what comparison is there to our small few sins? Khud Haq Ta'ala Shan ka paak irshad hai. But the reality is that Allah Almighty says, jo Hadith Qudsi mein aaya hai, that Allah Almighty mentions, Nabi Sallallahu mentions in Hadith Qudsi, narrating from Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, ke bande ke guman ke saath ho, ke आया है कि बंदे के गुमान के साथ हूँ, उसको चाहिए कि मेरे साथ नेक गुमान करे. That I am according to the hope and the desires of the person, of the slave, he should also have hope, pious thoughts about me. And at the same time, when you carry out your actions, carry out actions of piety, but at the same time have positive thoughts about Allah Almighty, have umeed. It shouldn't be the case that you carry out sins, but then you have hope in Allah Almighty. But you should be a balance between the two. ये इरशाद यकीनन सही है और ताला शाह का यही पाक इरशाद है. As the Shaykh mentions that this is absolutely true, and Allah Almighty says this as well. लेकिन इसके साथ ये भी ये समझ लेना चाहिए, but at the same time a person should realize कि शैतान आदमी को किसी सही कलाम के गलत माने से गुमराह कर सकता है. That शैतान is able to lead one astray through the correct speech. अगर ऐसा न होता तो शैतान को धोखा देने में मुश्किल पेश आती. If it was not the case, then the shaitan would find it difficult to deceive someone. इसी चीज़ को हुज़ूर सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने अपने इरशाद से वाज़े फरमाया है. It's this which नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम has clarified in his speech, कि समझदार वो शख्स है, that the wise person is that person जो अपने नफ्स को मुती करे, who disciplines and makes his nafs obedient to himself. मरने के बाद के लिए अमाल करे, he carries out actions that are going to come in use in the hereafter. और अहमक वो शख्स है, and the foolish is that person जो नफ्स की ख्वाहिशात का इत्तिबा करे. He follows the desires of his nafs. Allah Ta'ala par umeed bande, and at the same time he has hope in Allah Almighty. So he lets his body do what it wants to do, but then he has hope. No, but the clever person is the person who makes his nafs obedient to him, and he carries out actions for the hereafter. हक़ ताला शान पर जिसको शैतान ने हक़ ताला शान के साथ नेक उम्मीद का गिलाफ पहनाया है, हक़ ताला शान पर जिसको शैतान ने हक़ ताला शान के साथ नेक उम्मीद का गिलाफ पहनाया है, हक़ ताला शान ने अपने उम्मीदें रखने की खुद शरह फरमा दी. Allah Almighty, then he mentions that Allah Almighty has already explained his own when it comes to hopes in the Quran Kareem. He says, Inna alladhina amanu, indeed those that bring faith, walladhina hajaru, those that did hijrat, wajahadu, and carried out jihad fi sabilillah, in the path of Allah, ulaika yarjuna rahmatullah, they are the ones who have hope in Allah Almighty, in the mercy of Allah Almighty. Yani haqiqat mein jo log iman laye, those people that bring faith, and he carries out tarjuma. He says that, in this verse Allah Almighty mentions that the hope comes together with actions. Actions and hope have to be together. It shouldn't be the case that one carries out sins and then has hope in Allah Almighty. Rather, have hope in Allah Almighty, but also at the same time carry out actions. Quran Pak mein jagah jagah jannat ko, uski ne'mat ko, amal ka badla bataya gaya. In very many places Allah Almighty has mentioned in the Quran Kareem, Jannat, paradise, and the ne'mat and the actions. ऐसी हालत में गौर करने की चीज़ है कि अगर कोई शख्स किसी को बर्तन बनाने पर मजदूर रखे. Each person should think about this. If a person makes someone a laborer and he gives him some work to do, to make pots, और बहुत बड़ी उज्जत उसकी मुकर्रर कर दे, and he gives him a great recompense, he pays him a good salary for this, जिसकी कोई हद नहीं, for which there is no limit, और वो शख्स निहायत करीम हो, and this person is greatly generous, मजदूरी देने में बहुत सखी, when it comes to giving the money he is very very generous, उज्जत मुकर्रर पर बहुत ज़्यादा इनाम देने वाला हो, he gives more upon than he needs to upon the fixed amount of salary. जो बर्तन ख़राब बन जाए उन पर भी उज्जत दे. Those pots that he's making with his hand, if they become bad, if they break or they're not perfect, he still gives him a salary for this. जिनमें मामूली नुक्स रह जाए उन पर भी तसामुल कर लेता है. It is some sort of deficiencies he ignores. और मजदूर बजाय बर्तन बनाने के उनके औजारों को भी तोड़ दे. But when it comes to the mazdoor, when it comes to the laborer, instead of making the pots, what does he do? He breaks even the equipment and the tools that are there. और ये कहे, and he says कि बर्तन बनवाने वाला बड़ा करीम है. He says that the person who's employed me to make these pots is extremely generous. उजरत बहुत ज़्यादा देता है. He gives a lot of labor, a lot of salary. इसलिए उन सबको तोड़ फोड़ कर बहुत ज़्यादा उजरत मिलने के इंतज़ार में बैठा रहे. So then what he does is he breaks all the pots and he says I'm waiting for a lot of reward instead. क्या कोई अहमक भी उसको अकल वाला कहेगा? Is it the case that even a foolish person would say that this person is wise? और ये हमाकत इस वजह से होती है, and this stupidity is such is because कि उम्मीद और तमन्ना में फ़र्क नहीं समझा जाता. Why? Because he doesn't have a difference, he's not able to differentiate between umeed, having hope, and tamanna, and having aspirations. The Shaykh Rahmatullah is mentioning this. He's saying that a person is employed to do a work, and he knows that the person who's employing is extremely kind and benevolent, and the person who's being employed, he breaks all the rules of employment in every single way, to such an extent that he's been asked to make pots, he breaks the pots, and he also breaks the tools to make the pot. And then at the same time he turns around and says that the person who's employed me is extremely kind and generous. So then, he's going to still reward me. Anyone who's there with any sense of mind will turn around and say that this person is foolish, extremely foolish. So he's likening this situation to our situation. That Allah Almighty has given us everything, and we have everything in front of us. We're able to acquire all the reward we want. But then instead of following the ahkam of Allah Almighty, we throw it behind our backs and we focus on fulfilling our desires. But at the same time, what do? We then have hope in Allah Almighty. As the Shaykh there mentions, that one thing is having hope. Having hope is such that you carry out the pious actions and then have hope in Allah Almighty. And the other thing is aspirations. It's just a whimsical thought that comes to your mind. So when it comes to us and our life and the way we pursue our life, then we need to carry out our actions. But at the same time, we have hope in Allah Almighty. It shouldn't be such that we don't carry out the actions, but then we just have aspirations. Inshallah, we'll carry on next week. The tashriq carries on after that. There'll be zikr for a little while. And then inshallah we'll call it a day. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanakallah bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Inshallah, zikr will take place. But on this occasion, today, instead of doing zikr ijtimai, everyone can do their own zikr if they've been given zikr from the mashayikh. And the zikr that we normally do is zikr targhibi, but today, whoever's here, there's a couple of people who have got zikr themselves, they can do their own zikr. And inshallah next week we'll carry on with zikr targhibi in ijtimai fashion. If you don't have zikr, then you can just pray Durood Sharif, Istighfar, third kalimah. And the ladies at home, they're encouraged to do the zikr, whatever zikr they have their mamul to do. But preferably on a daily basis, at least 300 Durood Sharif, Istighfar, third kalimah. So during this time they can do the zikr of the tasbihat and make it a mamul to carry out on a daily basis, inshallah. Bismillah. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. La ilaha illallah, 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 la ilaha إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا إله إلا الله 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 سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا وسندنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا إله إلا الله 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 محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا إله إلا الله 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 محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا إله إلا الله 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 محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا إله إلا الله 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 محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا إله إلا الله 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 سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا وسندنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا إله إلا الله 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 محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا إله إلا الله 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 محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا إله إلا الله 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 محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا إله إلا الله 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 سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا وسندنا ومولانا محمد الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم لا إله إلا الله 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 محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا إله إلا الله 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 محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا إله إلا الله 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 محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا إله إلا الله 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 سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا وسندنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله تبارك وتعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وأزواجه وأتباعه وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا.